Is the Utah housing market going down? Now, there's been a lot of talk about that in 2025. Now we're starting the beginning of November of 2025, and I want to take a look at some of the numbers with you, compare them to '08, and just give you a general feel of what's going on. No doubt about it, the market has slowed down in a lot of aspects, compared to what we were seeing in 2022 and 2023, but that is coming to bite people who paid a ton of money for houses back then. And so I'm going to jump right into it today. Okay, so first I want to show you a couple of graphs from Zillow's heat index map that they talk about. And this dates back to 2018. And this first graphic that I'm going to show you is the Salt Lake City metro area. And Zillow is reporting that it is still a neutral market. Now, if you look at this graph historically since 2018, it has always been either a neutral market, or you can see in 2022 how it goes way up, and in 2021 it was way up with a seller's market. It was a very strong seller's market. But as we have creeped down into 2025, you can see it's slowly going down to a neutral market, and it is almost at a buyer's market, but Zillow does not consider it a buyer's market in Salt Lake City yet. Okay, and then taking a look at the Provo region, you can see they are slightly higher at 55 according to Zillow compared to Salt Lake at 53. So they're still in a neutral market as well. So it's not a buyer's market, it's not a seller's market, it's just kind of neutral, where both parties are giving and taking a little bit in the transaction. You see sellers in Utah offering closing costs, and maybe buyers are getting close to the list price or below list price. So there's just a lot of give and take right now in the market with a neutral market. Okay, and then going down to southern Utah and the St. George region. Now they are barely hanging on at a neutral market. Their score is a 45. Just to give you an idea, Zillow is saying that a buyer's market is ranked between 28 to 44. And I'm going to put a graph up here so you can see Zillow's numerical value and strong seller's market, strong buyer's market. But just an average buyer's market is 28 to 44. Once it drops below 28, it is considered a strong buyer's market. So St. George is hanging on there at 45 for a neutral market. Okay, and then finally, the last region that Zillow reports on in Utah is the Logan market, and they have officially hit, according to Zillow, a buyer's market just barely at 44. It's just recently dropped that low. Now, both St. George and Logan have seen more of a buyer's market compared to Salt Lake and Provo regions historically, as you can see here. But it does give you a good indication that Zillow is saying that Logan is considered a buyer's market currently. So let's talk about what I'm seeing in the market currently. So I've been working with quite a few first-time home buyers. So I am seeing the prices coming down and being in a more affordable range for first-time home buyers. I'm not saying it's great or anything else, but I am seeing more price reductions, more closing costs. I am seeing properties that are generally sitting on the market longer. Now, a lot of them are still going under contract pretty quickly, but for my first-time home buyers that are looking at townhouses and condos, I am seeing, I've seen some at 180 days on the market and still no offers for places that are in kind of great locations and still sitting. So things have slowed down, but more importantly, I am starting to see foreclosures. There's a lot more short sales or notice of defaults hitting the market. Now, a notice of default could be a foreclosure, it could be a short sale, and those typically take about 3 to 6 months for them to be recorded with the county as a notice of default. So Gonna see a little bit more of a concern coming into the end of the year with the government shutdown and how those government workers without a paycheck have been able to make their mortgage payments or not. But I want to talk about some of the numbers for those notice of defaults. Now, in 2025, for the state of Utah, we have had about 5 months where the notice of default have been over 100 per month. Now, the last 3 months, August, September, and October, all 3 of those months have hit 100 plus notice of default in the state of Utah. Now, to give you a comparison, in 2008, Utah was seeing about 500 notice of defaults filed per month. So still not even close to the levels of the housing crash of 2008, but we are creeping up. Now, of course, I don't have the time to sit there and look at every single notice of default and look at the history behind them, but I will tell you, I randomly selected some of the notice of defaults that are on the market currently, which, if you're wondering, as of November 6th, we have 91 notice of defaults, short sales, anything like that for Salt Lake, Utah, and Davis counties only. There are 91 currently on the market that are either active or under contract. Now, most of those, 46 of them, are in Utah County alone, and then the remainder are in Salt Lake and Utah County. I did not look at that as a whole state, just the 3 counties. Now, when I looked at those 91, I just randomly selected about 5 or 6 of them, and I looked back historically, and almost every single one of the ones I looked at was purchased previously in 22 and 2023. So that was the height of the market when people were often paying above listing price and just so desperate to get into a house. But you also saw back then people doing temporary rate buy downs. You saw those, we'll buy your rate down for 2 years or 3 years. And now those rate buy downs are coming to an end, and we are seeing these notice of defaults increasing because buyers back then, they did what they could to get into a house. Well, now they're paying normal interest rates and their rate is no longer bought down, and they're having trouble making their mortgage payments. So that is something to consider. I'm not saying it's every situation, but the timing does kind of line up. And that is one of the reasons why I have never been a fan of people saying date the rate and buy, or date the rate and marry the house, or whatever. I've always hated that, because this is a perfect example of how that kind of mentality can get you in trouble. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. That tells me you appreciate the content that I'm putting out and the effort that I'm putting out and the information that I'm giving to you. So really quick, I want to talk a little bit more about those short sales and the special listing conditions is what I'll call them for Salt Lake, Utah, and Davis County. So like I said, as of November 6th, there are 91 in those 3 counties that are either active, backed up, or under contract. And backup means they're accepting backup offers, but they are technically under contract. So we're sitting at 91 currently. So I went back and looked. Year to date, we have had 87 of them sell in those 3 counties. And it has gone up over the years. So, or I should say, let's work backwards. So 87 so far in 2025, 69 in 2024, 32 in 2023, and we even had 11 of them back in 2022. But you can see a drastic difference. 2022 was sitting at 11. This year already we're sitting at 87. Now, looking at the entire state, the Deseret News did an article, and I will put a link to the article below so you can read it. The entire state of Utah in 2008 had over 18,000. We were at 18,657 notice of defaults, foreclosures in 2008 for the entire state. Just to give you an idea, comparison, it's not even close. We are sitting at 158 sold for the entire state of Utah in 2025. So you're talking basically 10 of 12 months, we've had 158 compared to over 18,000 in 2008. So I do not think we are in that desperate crash, oh my gosh, the market is falling type mentality. And the numbers show that. You cannot compare almost 19,000 in 2008 to not even 200 in 2025. Now, in Utah as a whole, we are seeing an increase in listings. We are sitting at over 13,000 active listings as of November 6th for the entire state on utahrealestate.com. Now, that is not the only MLS, but that a lot of the state's inventory does get put onto that website. Now, I'm going to put this chart up for you to see, and this is a sales per month graph from Utah Real Estate with the average numbers for the entire state, regardless of housing type, condo, mobile home, single family, townhouse, whatever. Now, our inventory, like I said, is up this year at over 13,000, which is higher than it was in October of 2024. Since we're just at the beginning of November, I'm kind of throwing November out the window because I can't compare last November to 6 days of this month. But looking at October of 2024 compared to October 2025, we have sold fewer homes in 2025 than we did in 2024 for the month of October. But take a look at the average sold price. In 2024, October of 2024, it was almost $667,000 was the average sold price. This October, it was $699,000. So our average sales price still went up, but also our days on market this October is also higher than it was last October. So it kind of goes in line with what Zillow is reporting of it being kind of a neutral market. You wouldn't think if our inventory is up higher than it was last year that our average sales price would also be up from where it was last year, but here we are. That is what is happening. Now, I want to briefly talk about the National Association of Realtors home buyer and seller report that they put out for 2025. Now, they looked at data from the summer of 24 through the summer of 2025 and put together kind of a demographic look at the average seller, the average buyer on a national level. And the interesting thing about this is, take a look at this. For sellers nationally, we're at an all-time high where home sellers have been in their home for 11 years. You used to hear 7 years. Now it's up to 11 years. And so that is telling you that people are staying in their homes longer. Now, take a look at the first-time home buyer information from the National Association of Realtors. The median age of a first-time home buyer in the US was 40 years old. I think they said that was the highest it's been in about 4 decades. So kind of crazy to look at that. But also take a look at the median down payment was the highest on record since 1989. So you can see there, 10% median down payment, matching the highest level recorded since 1989. And then it goes into what the top sources were for down payment. Now, with the median age being higher than it's ever been, it can be detrimental. Take a look at what the National Association of Realtors said about this. So the home ownership range going from 30 to 40, that 10-year difference can mean losing roughly $150,000 in equity on a typical starter home by these first-time home buyers being the age of 40 instead of 30. That's kind of crazy to think about $150,000 loss approximately in 10 years and the difference that makes. So the next several months is going to be really interesting without getting into politics, because I do not do that. I hope for the sake of these government workers, they're still able to figure something out with their mortgages, or that they've saved and they're not quite in a dire situation of losing their home. But we will want to take a look at that and keep an eye on that the next several months as we end 25 and go into 2026. Now, the Fed did cut rates, but we're not seeing that hit the mortgage rates as well as many people had hoped that it would. So, and December, they're already saying that they don't know that they're going to drop the rates. So if you've been thinking about buying, this is where you're going to want to take a look and keep your eye on the market, because I am seeing and hearing more and more people that are like, I'm selling my house for $40,000 less than I paid for it in 2022. It's a sad reality for those home sellers that purchased at the height of the market and cannot ride out the market and for several years. So if you're looking at making a real estate move, I'd love to connect with you. Give me a call or send me a text. That is the best way to reach me. But as always, make it a great day.